The Federal Reserve controls the flow of money in the American economy, a role that is supposed to be above politics. But what happens when a nominee for its board is accused of wanting to use that power to pick winners and losers, specifically, to bankrupt an entire industry? This isn't just a technical debate. It's a battle over the fundamental purpose of one of the world's most powerful institutions. Let's watch the critical exchange between Senator John Kennedy and nominee Sarah Bloom Raskin. It reveals the entire strategy at play.
Recognized. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Jefferson, Dr. Cook, I may not get to ask you many questions today because I want to concentrate on Ms. Raskin's proposal to change the mission of the Federal Reserve. But I've read about both of you. It's clear to me we disagree on some things in terms of our politics, but in America you can believe what you want. That's why it's such a great country. Dr. Jefferson, I believe you're at Davidson. You're a professor there? Yeah, there's no better place in America to get a liberal arts education. Dr. Cook, you are a Truman Scholar, and you were a Marshall Scholar. You were at St. Hilda's? Yes. Okay. You ever met a Marshall Scholar that was a dummy?
No, Senator.
Me neither. The only advice for what it was worth, for what it's worth that I have for each of you is, number one, please don't change the mission of the Federal Reserve. Please don't let it be politicized. And number two, don't get caught up in the group think over there. Okay? Only dead fish go with the flow. Don't get caught up in the group think. Now, Ms. Raskin, May of 2020, the world economy is melting down because government shut it down. We're trying to hold it together with baling wire, duct tape, spit, and happy thoughts. And you say, that's great, but we ought to let oil and gas companies go broke. Did you really mean that?
Well, thank you, Senator Kennedy.
You're welcome.
For that question. And the Federal Reserve has particular mandates set out by law.
But I know about all that, but did you mean it? You said it, here it is, big as Dallas. I read the op-ed. You said, save everybody but the oil and gas industry and let them go broke. Did you really mean that?
So I have been clear on my views. The whole point of the op-ed was that the Fed should not pick winners and losers.
Except for oil and gas. You said they ought to be allowed to go broke.
The Fed should not pick or favor any sector at all.
Then why did you say it?
The Fed is not in the business of choosing winners and losers.
Then why did you recommend to them that they let oil and gas go broke?
I did not recommend.
Yes, ma'am, I read the op-ed. There it is. It's. I'm not going to quote it to you, but Senator Toomey pointed out. Why did you mean it?
Senator Kennedy, I want you to understand the role of the proper role of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve should not be choosing winners and losers.
Yes, ma'am. So you disagree with the editorial?
The editorial was one that I wrote. And I wrote it in the context of the Federal Reserve's emergency lending facilities. This was a special program set up by the CARES Act, by the Congress, that appropriated taxpayer money. This was an issue quite unlike the issue of supervision.
And you said don't give the money to oil and gas. Let them go broke, because in my opinion, they're bad for the environment. Didn't you?
I want you to understand the context for that article. That article had to do with did not have to do with supervision and regulation.
Dr. Raskin, you said it. You ought to own it. Okay, you ought to own it.
Sorry?
You said it. You ought to own what you said. I'd respect you more if you did. Let me move on to this business of allocating capital. Now, look, this is America. You can believe what you want, and I mean that. But I don't agree with your mission to politicize the Federal Reserve.
I don't believe the Federal Reserve should be politicized either.
Well, then why did you say it? Why did you say in this June 2020 piece, quote, federal regulatory bodies should allocate capital?
It is not the role of the Federal Reserve in supervisory or regulatory matters in its functioning as...
Then why did you write it?
It was written in a context, Senator, that had to do with emergency lending. It did not have to do with the context of supervision
I mean,
and regulation.
I feel strongly about charter schools, okay? If some president or some chairman of the Federal Reserve said, let's all get together and allocate capital away, lean on all the banks so they don't fund charter schools. You support that? I mean, you support driving oil and gas industry into bankruptcy. Do you think that would be the proper role for the Federal Reserve?
No, obviously not. The Federal Reserve is not to get involved in allocating credit to any particular sector.
So you changed your mind?
I have made myself completely clear. The whole point of the op-ed was that the Fed should not pick winners and losers or expose taxpayers to undue risk.
Senator Kennedy, your time's expired.
Well, no, you went 3 minutes over.
I did, and so did Senator Toomey, but we need this hearing done by 11 o'clock.
Well, can I ask one more?
No, you've already gone 2 minutes over. Senator Warner, you're recognized, Senator from Virginia.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What we just witnessed was not a simple Q&A session. It was a strategic trap. Senator Kennedy's goal was not to understand Ms. Raskin's nuanced position. His strategy was to force her into a political corner by repeatedly asking the same question in slightly different ways. By demanding she own his interpretation of her words, he framed any attempt to provide context as evasion. Notice how he dismisses her explanation about the CARES Act, saying, "I know about all that," and immediately returns to his core accusation. This is a classic cross-examination tactic designed to create a simple, damaging soundbite that the nominee is shifty and refuses to give a straight answer. On her side, Ms. Raskin consistently tries to draw a distinction between two very different functions of the Federal Reserve. This is the crucial context that gets lost in the exchange. The Fed's day-to-day job is to manage inflation and employment, acting as a neutral referee for the banking system. The CARES Act, however, created special temporary emergency programs using taxpayer money to prevent a total economic collapse during the pandemic. Raskin's argument is that her op-ed was specifically about how to use that temporary, taxpayer-funded bailout money, not about changing the Fed's core, ongoing mission. When she says the Fed shouldn't pick winners and losers, she's stating its traditional role. When Kennedy points to her article, he's highlighting what he sees as a direct contradiction. The entire conflict hinges on whether you believe that context matters. This highlights two major themes: the intentional politicization of the Fed's mission and the battle between nuanced policy and political theater. This specific confirmation hearing is a window into a much larger global debate. What is the proper role of a central bank in the 21st century? Traditionally, institutions like the Federal Reserve were meant to be politically independent, focusing only on the technical mechanics of the economy, like interest rates and financial stability. However, there is a growing movement that argues central banks cannot ignore massive economy-wide risks like climate change. Proponents argue that failing to account for climate risk is a failure of the Fed's duty to ensure long-term financial stability. Opponents, like Senator Kennedy, argue this is a dangerous overreach, a backdoor attempt to enact climate policy without the consent of Congress, effectively turning the Fed into an unelected economic planner. Think of the economy as a garden. The traditional view of the Fed is that it just controls the main water supply for the whole garden. The accusation against Raskin is that she wants the Fed to start deciding which specific plants get more water while letting others wither and die. So, what are the key takeaways from all of this? First, confirmation hearings are often less about finding truth and more about performance. This was a masterclass in political strategy, designed to create a specific, negative narrative about a nominee. Second, the core of the disagreement is about context. The entire debate rests on whether a statement about a specific, one-time emergency program can be used to define a nominee's entire philosophy on the Fed's permanent role. And third, This exchange is a proxy for a much larger battle over the future of central banking. It's a fight over whether these powerful institutions should stick to their narrow, traditional mandates or evolve to confront modern challenges like climate change. This brings us to the fundamental question at the heart of this debate. Is it legitimate for the Federal Reserve to consider long-term risks like climate change when making policy? Or does that represent a dangerous politicization of its mission? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this analysis helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video.